Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. It's a power-packed one-hour program this evening. On the show, our first debate. The Supreme Court comes down heavily on the government for its inability to resolve the farmer protests. Either hold back the farmer laws or we will hold them back, says the court. The protests have now been on for more than 40 days. People have lost their lives. The court wants to know what prevents the government to stop implementing the laws for the moment. Next up on the program, if COVID was not enough, the bird flu has now been detected in 10 states across India, including the national capital, Delhi. Just how serious is this threat? Should one be eating poultry items? When can avian flu turn lethal? That's next as a debate. And finally, later on the program, we'll be joined by the MIT professor Orup Chakravarti and Andre Shaw on their new book, Viruses, Pandemics and Immunity. A look ahead at the lessons that we've learned from the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, why pandemics happen in the first place, and how an integrated system of technologies will help us respond more rapidly the next time something like this takes place. But first, our top story. The Supreme Court, while hearing a batch of pleas filed against the farmers' protest across the borders of the national capital against the three contentious farm laws, came down heavily on the centre. Here's what the court said.
Just moments into today's hearing on the farm protests, the centre came under fire. The bench, headed by Chief Justice S.A. Bobde, Justice A.S. Bopanna and Justice Ramasubramanian, said, "We don't see you are dealing with this issue effectively. We are taking a decision today." And then the bombshell. "Tell us whether you will put the implementation of these laws on hold or else we will do it. We propose to form a committee to negotiate between the farmers and the government on these laws."
The Attorney General K.K. Venugopal pushed back, saying that the court can't stay the law at this stage and that stay on implementing a law equals to stay on the laws. But he appeared to relent when the court pressed again, saying, what if the farmers refuse to join the talks before the committee?
To this, the court said, "We hope farmers will join the committee." Lawyers appearing for 8 farmer groups, including Dushyant Dave, said they would consult the farmers and get back in a day. The apex court also gave some advice to the protesting farmers, saying, after the implementation of laws is stayed, you can carry on with your protest. Right to protest should be exercised like Gandhiji's Satyagraha. Do it peacefully. Let women, children and senior citizens go back home. But farm leaders say they continue to insist on the repeal of the laws.
4 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ 5 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਅੰਦੋਲਨ ਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਚ ਹੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਐਮਐਸਪੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਗਰੰਟੀ ਕਰ ਦਿਓ, ਇੱਕ ਨਵੀਂ ਲਾਈਨ ਪਾ ਦਿਓ, ਨਵਾਂ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਣਾ ਦਿਓ ਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ। ਇਹ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਿੱਲ ਬਣਾਏ ਆ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਅੱਛੇ ਆ। ਉਹ ਅੰਦੋਲਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਪੀਕ ਫੁੱਲ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਐ ਸਿਰੇ ਤੇ ਚੱਲ ਗਿਆ ਵਾ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਣ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਜਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾ ਸੁਪਰੀਮ ਕੋਰਟ ਵੱਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਈਏ, ਸਾਡਾ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ।
The Supreme Court has listed the matter for Tuesday, where the court will be passing orders on setting up of a committee and on staying the implementation of these 3 farm laws. With camera person Pooja Arya and Arun Singh from Singhu Border, this is Aravind Gunasekar for NDTV.
Well, some breaking news related to this story just coming in now. The centre has moved the Supreme Court to stop the farmers' tractor rally that was expected on Republic Day later this month. The centre has filed an affidavit also in the Supreme Court on the farmers' issue. They say the farmers' laws were not hurriedly made and it is a result of 2 decades of deliberations. The farmers of the nation are happy as they have been given an additional option over and above existing laws. No vested right is taken away. The centre also stating that holding the tractor rally on Republic Day will damage the pride of the nation worldwide. So that's what has been filed in terms of an affidavit in the Supreme Court. Joining us now, Yogendra Yadav, the National President of Swaraj India, Rajat Sethi, the political analyst, with us as well. Sunil Alag joins us, as does the senior lawyer Rajiv Nair. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. Rajat, let me just come to you first. Why is the government reluctant for the moment to stop implementation of these laws? The Supreme Court had suggested it earlier on, and today they were very clear. Let me quote, "You tell us if you will put on hold the implementation of the laws, otherwise we will do it."
Well, thank you, Vishnu, for having this discussion. And there was a lot that was said today by the bench of the Honorable Supreme Court. And let me unpack it for your audience today, what all was said. One thing that the Supreme Court repeated today, and it was the Chief Justice of India which repeated this point, that all he is trying to do is to create a conducive environment and a comfortable environment for both the parties to come to the negotiating table. And it is with this intent that the farmers and the unions who are representing these farmers will come before the committee which is going to be created by the Supreme Court, and it will have the Indian Council for Agricultural Research members part of that committee, that these farmers are going to appear before them in a peaceful manner. So I think what Supreme Court said, it was not passing a judgment on the laws per se. It was primarily saying that in order to break the logjam or break the stalemate between the two sides which were negotiating, this is the simple partner, which is the best alternative to a negotiated settlement. And it is here that you need to understand that the Chief Justice was deeply worried that what if a stray incident can spark violence among the protesters. And he repeated that it is the Article 21 that I'm invoking here, that there will be loss of life and loss of property if some kind of a breakthrough in the talks is not going to happen. Remember, it was these farmers, when they were meeting with the representatives, the ministerial representatives, they used to turn their chairs back, not look straight up into in those meetings. They used to cover their eyes and ears, demanding one thing, that is repealing of the law. Today, Supreme Court hoped that these farmers are going to come out before the committee, and once the committee sits and they discuss, it will again go back to discussions on clause by clause to understand if these laws are in public interest or not.
All right.
How will the farmers then go back on their principal thing?
So let me take that across to Mr. Rajiv Nair for a moment. Mr. Nair, I'm just trying to understand the legality of this particular issue. On what basis can the Supreme Court put a halt, hypothetically, on laws which have been enacted in Parliament?
Vishnu, you are absolutely right. The jurisdiction of courts is quite restricted when laws are enacted. They are very seldom interfere. But I think this is a case where certainly the Supreme Court, in its power as the apex court, can certainly halt the implementation of the act. And I think it's a very important thing, because the Chief Justice has actually echoed what many people across the country feel. It's a legislation which has been thought of in haste. I just want to remind everybody that there are three principles: compassion, concession, and consensus. And in all these three principles have been breached insofar as these laws are concerned. You look at the plight of the people standing, and the Chief Justice is absolutely right. If everybody, or at least 10 or 12 people, start committing suicide, what will be the fate of this agitation? Now, what was the hurry? Why was there no consensus amongst political parties before rushing through this bill, this act? Of course, it has been there for long, but there should have been a consensus. And then, why not a concession on certain key issues? Like we just heard that person saying that only if there's an assurance on MSP, we can retract.
Mr. Alag, right, Mr. Nair, I just want to keep the strike rotating. I'll come back to you in a moment. We've got time. Mr. Alag, you know, this is what the centre has filed in their affidavit just a little while back. They've said lots of points about why the centre should stop the farmers' tractor rally. They've moved the Supreme Court, and among the points that they've mentioned is that the centre believes that holding a tractor rally by farmers, which has been planned on Republic Day, will damage the pride of the nation worldwide. And yet we have here in India this profound issue. Is that what we should be worried about, our international reputation, when we are talking about, you know, something as important as our own farmers and their rights?
You know, as a student of political science, I don't know about law, because Mr. Nair and Rajat Sethi are much better off in terms of law. Look, there's a clear demarcation between the executive and the judiciary. once the executive decides something, judiciary has no role to play. Tomorrow we can go into, if there's an income tax law, I just want to ask them, if there's an income tax law, can I take 20,000 people, lie down on the road and say, unless this law is taken back, and I will move the Supreme Court, and they are setting up a very poor precedent if they get into that area. Then I will also say the income tax law is bad. Therefore, the parliament has to take it back and put a stay on it then. Look, there's a clear demarcation between executive and judiciary. Judiciary is supposed to follow the law of the executive in parliament. They cannot put a stay on any law that the parliament has passed, wrong or right. And at the same time, when your money had been taken away, the people were committing suicide. So you could have gone to Supreme Court and said, no, parliament should not have done that, demonetized every note. Like, you are opening up a hornet's nest. You're opening up a Pandora's box if executive and judiciary come into a clash now.
No, but why would that necessarily be the case, sir? Mr. Alagh, why would that necessarily be the case?
Vishnu, for instance, when they say that either you stay the law or we will step in.
No, but there's a clarification, Mr. Alagh, on this.
Now.
In fact,
whether
staying the law...
I'm not defending whether it was done in a hurry or whether it was not done in a hurry.
I see the point you're
Legally,
making.
it has been
You're saying
passed.
there shouldn't be a clash between
passed.
the courts and the judiciary and the executive. I take that point. But in fact, today in the Supreme Court, there's been an answer to that. The court has said today, staying the law is different from staying the implementation of the laws. And let me quote what one of the judges said. Staying the implementation of laws and staying the law are very different.
To answer, if tomorrow there's an income tax law passed by parliament, can I take 20,000 people and lie down on the ground and say this is bad in law?
No, but 1 second, sir. They've not said it's bad in law. They are saying that they are suggesting that the law be stayed for now. They have not said get rid of the law. Mr. Nair, is that an important distinction that needs to be understood?
This is a very important distinction, and Mr. Alagh is absolutely wrong. The Supreme Court has not stayed the implementation of the law because 20,000 people are lying down. They feel that the law is bad per se. This argument by saying that if the executive enacts a law, then the judiciary should just step back. This is, I think, one of the most retrograde arguments I've heard, that the judiciary should just step back because the executive has enacted a law. The judiciary is there to make sure that the executive doesn't enact bad laws. And the Supreme Court has stated is intending or contemplating only staying the implementation. You are absolutely right. They are not declaring the law bad today.
Okay, Rajat, you had a point. Go ahead.
Yes. Vishnu, what the gentleman was mentioning is that the Supreme Court today took a value judgment on the laws. That is absolutely not the case. He should read the observations which was made by the Chief Justice today. And I will quote here. He said that what if there is bloodshed? He said it is the Article 21, which the Supreme Court should refer to and should protect in this case, that somebody has to intervene and ensure at least that there is no loss of life or property in the days to come. And it is for this reason and this reason alone that the Supreme Court said that it is better that we hold the implementation of the law, and that too reluctantly. And they mentioned it repeatedly that it is not something which is of a norm that the Supreme Court will step into the preserve of the executive or the legislature.
But at the same time,
but in this case, they just have to bring in some level of holding onto the implementation, primarily because there might be some cases of violence in the future.
At the same time, Rajat, the court said, and I quote, "We are not against protests. Don't understand that the court is stifling protests." I would suggest what the judge was saying is, don't believe that the court is stifling protests. I think the suggestion here is, the court is saying, we are not against protests. Protests are fine. They can go on, as long as it's peaceful, obviously.
Absolutely, and this is where a distinction has to be brought out. What happened to the Haryana Chief Minister's public meeting that he was holding, and the kind of violence that we all observed there. There were a lot of people, even in the media, which were glorifying what the protesters were doing. It is pretty shameful what they did. If
Absolutely,
they resort to violence,
all violence completely shameful. But therefore, Rajat, and I mean, just not to get into an argument with you on this. The point by the courts appears to be that, look, if there is a potential for violence, then keep the law aside for the moment, sort it out. It seems to be commonsensical.
So they said that it is commonsensical to the point that the farmers, and I'll quote here, the Chief Justice said that you cannot demand, and he is addressing the farmers here, and the representative of the unions, you cannot demand the repeal of the law when the law is not in force. This is what the Chief Justice says. So he repeated this point that I'm doing this in order to facilitate a conducive and a comfortable environment for talks which will be held by the committee which is going to be appointed by the Supreme Court. Okay. So the Chief Justice made a remark that the farmers should not be asking for the repeal because in effect the laws are not in force.
Okay, Mr. Nair, let me ask you this. The Supreme Court appeared to be irked or irritated in a sense by the fact that the government hasn't responded to suggestions made to the court on the 17th of December about possibly withholding the implementation of laws. In fact, the Chief Justice sort of said, and I quote, "We asked you this last occasion, but you haven't replied, and the matter is getting worse. People are committing suicide. People are suffering in the cold." Is that been a central problem over here? The centre has not been listening to what the court has suggested.
Vishnu, I want to raise a very fundamental question. When court asks a government to please reconsider and respond, then the government, howsoever strong a majority you have, you can't push forward and say, no, we won't have a second thing.
Okay.
And I think that's what really must have provoked the court, because this legislation is being introduced for the first time. It's not as if that legislation has been in place and the Supreme Court is saying, please don't go ahead. So legislation is yet to come into force. Supreme Court on 17 December says, please have a relook at some provisions if you want. Please just have a relook in the light of the agitations which are going on. So a responsible government should certainly have got up and said, yes, my lords, we should reconsider. We'll defer it for the time being. Whether defer it for a week or 2 weeks, 4 weeks, but we certainly respect the sentiments of the court by having a relook or a reconsideration.
Okay.
But if a government says, no, come what way, we don't bother about your observations, we are going to go ahead regardless, but then that's not a very great day for democracy.
Yogendra Yadav joins us as well at this stage. Yogendra ji, just in the last little while, the centre has filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court opposing the proposed tractor rally of farmers on Republic Day. They say that among other points, that on Republic Day it affects the image of India internationally. Do farmers still intend to go ahead with this tractor rally?
I wouldn't comment on any affidavit that I have not seen. We don't know what it is all about. It is quite clear that whatever we do on the 26th of January would certainly not lower the dignity of this republic. It is not government's Republic Day. It is our Republic Day. And whatever we do would not tarnish the image of the country, would, if anything, enhance the image of the republic, where people are supreme. But I don't want to get distracted into this last-minute little trick by the government. I wish to focus on the real main thing that happened in the Supreme Court that we were discussing just before I arrived, because about half an hour ago, farmers' organizations have issued a formal statement. After considering the proceedings, after consulting all our lawyers, we have issued a formal statement for the media about the proceedings, something we did not speak about through the day. And I want to just put that across. While we feel grateful to the Supreme Court for the comforting words that the court has expressed, Supreme Court recognized the plight of the farmers. Supreme Court recognized the fact that farmers were dying. The Supreme Court also asked the government tough questions about how these legislations were passed without consulting the farmers. The Supreme Court asked them about the nature of negotiations which were not proceeding and held the government responsible. All this is comforting and we are grateful. However, there's something that concerns us, and I want to put it plainly. We did not approach the court. Only 8 of us were impleaded and asked to be present in the court. And with respect to the court, we appeared there. None of us, we did not ask any mediation from the court. And none of the petitions filed before the court asks for mediation. The petitioner says, throw them out. Someone else says, please repeal these laws.
No, but do you
The
object to
government did
mediation?
not ask it. Sorry?
Do you object to mediation or do you welcome it?
We do not know how the government. This was entirely a conversation between the Supreme Court and the government. The entire suggestion about committee, we were not consulted, we were not asked, and we are disappointed by the fact that our advocate, the advocate for 8 organizations, and these are only 8 out of 400 or so organizations, when our advocate requested that let's have hearing tomorrow so that he could take instructions from the farmers and get back. It doesn't seem to have happened, because if I can understand the order cause list for tomorrow, it simply says there would be orders tomorrow morning at 10:30, which means that farmers are not in the court, that farmers have not been heard. We have not been asked
but
whether we want the
Yogendraji, let me
committee
ask
or
you
not.
this. I understand what you're saying, that you would like to have been heard more in the Supreme Court. Be that as it may, if the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has suggested that there should be some sort of court-mediated committee which actually looks into the issue to try and resolve what is a huge crisis, then what is wrong with it? Why would various farmers' organizations be opposed to it? Should you not be welcoming it?
We don't know which committee. We don't know to which purpose. We don't know who asked for it. Mediation, you would agree with me, the Supreme Court has every right in this country to adjudicate anything. But mediation, you would agree with me, should be with consultation with 2 parties. I cannot say I decide to mediate between you and your employee without your asking for it, without your participating it, without your giving consent to it.
It's actually a suggestion.
Interestingly, in today's
as I
meeting,
understand it,
this was
Mr.
not
Yadav.
asked. Let me read out the part of the statement. It says clearly, and I want this to be absolutely clear to the country. We say, while all organizations welcome the suggestion of the Honorable Supreme Court to stay the implementation of the farm laws, they are collectively and individually not willing to participate in any proceedings before a committee that may be appointed by the Honorable Supreme Court. Mediation is not something we asked for. We were not even consulted about that. Our advocate says, please let me get back to my people, let me get instructions. And if that does not happen, how do we participate in anything?
Okay.
So we are not a party.
Okay, let me get a reaction to that. Sunil Alag, would you like to come in? This is a very important sort of message. Yogendraji represents some of the farmers, several of the farmers in fact, and their groups I should say. They don't want mediation in this manner at all.
No, all I want to say is that, look, the right to oppose, the right to go into strike, the right to do everything is kept in a democracy. But we are getting into very, very dangerous areas now. If you need to consult with the farmers when you pass a farm law, then you need to consult with industry when you pass a law on industry. Do you need to consult? Why do we elect people who go into parliament? And that is a fundamental question that we need to ask. Are we electing the wrong people? If we are, then we should talk about that and not a question of why weren't farmers consulted. That way, why wasn't the middle income group consulted when the income tax law was passed? Why was the industry not consulted when taxes were raised? You're opening up a Pandora's box on this. You do not consult everyone. The parliament decides. Now, wrong or right, I'm not saying the law is good. I'm not saying the law is bad. But if parliament has passed it, all that Supreme Court, the senior lawyer said what I was saying was incredulous. But what I'm saying is they can only judge whether the law was passed. Is it bad in law? If it is not bad in law, and Parliament has rightly passed it, and the President has put his signature on it, then it's law.
The Supreme Court has not made any comment on the law. They've just asked whether it can be stayed for the moment.
All I'm saying,
if it can be stopped for the moment from
is that, look, we need to not open up a Pandora's box where you consult everyone now, on everything now. What are you saying? That you have to consult everyone? And the farmers can stop all the industry completely. There are workers out there who go to Gurgaon every day who can't go. What about their livelihood? So if you're bringing in a lot of questions, you can oppose, you can have a strike, you can carry on, but you cannot stop the livelihood of people. Come on, yaar. I mean, what are we defending
one
now?
moment. Rajiv Nair, respond to that. Then I'll come to Yogendra Yadav. Rajiv Nair, you are nodding your head. Go ahead. The Supreme Court should not be involved, is his point.
Vishnu, before responding to this, I actually want to disagree with Mr. Yadav on a point that Supreme Court is not mediating. They are deciding on a question of law. So there's no question of, they are not acting in a capacity of mediation. They are saying that according to us, the law is prima facie. We ought to put it in abeyance until a committee ought to look at it. For that purpose, they are not going to ask the farmers their views on the aspect of mediation. It's not a mediated settlement which they are trying to bring about. That's one. Second, Mr. Alagh is wrong again, because he says just because Parliament enacts a law, that's the last word. So today the Supreme Court is not yet examined the constitutionality of the law. They have only prima facie opined. So it's wrong to say that once an act is enacted by the Parliament, then everybody else should step back. That's not how the law operates. That's not how the Constitution operates. The law is presumed to be valid until the court tests it. That's the principle.
Yogendraji, go ahead.
I was appalled to hear from someone of Sunil Alagh's intelligence that he questions the absolute fundamentals of democracy. Yes, sir, I'm saying every section that gets affected by any piece of law must be consulted. Ever heard of stakeholder consultation? I thought this is elementary norm in any democracy in the world. Ever heard of something called pre-legislative consultation? Every decent democracy practices it. And sir, Supreme Court has said that exactly in these many words today, that they are appalled that you don't consult the farmers and make a law. These are not my words. These are words reported by the CJI in the Supreme Court today. I'm absolutely astonished that you should think that the government need not consult people. And yes, industry should be consulted before making laws about the industry. Why not? I'm surprised that you don't think.
No, all I'm saying is that, look, if I can respond to him,
Just
all
very
I'm
briefly,
saying
you
is
lost the
that
signal,
tomorrow
yeah.
don't have a parliament then. Why do you elect people? They are supposed to represent you in parliament. Now, if they are not representing you, don't
There are
elect
questions
them.
on the implementation
Don't
of a
elect them.
particular
Now,
law
yeah.
because of a fairly
The other point
unprecedented
that my
set
friend
of
has made,
protests
Mr. Nair,
taking place.
probably.
The court is trying to stop this and to
yeah,
ensure that there is peace.
Can I
They don't
come in
want-
now?
Yeah, briefly, sir. We lost your signal. Yogendraji.
Yeah. If the Supreme Court is staying these orders because prima facie Supreme Court finds them unconstitutional, then obviously I have nothing to object to that. I would only welcome it. But if it is only to facilitate mediation...
No, but Yogendraji,
I'm
prima
not
facie,
sure
where
what
have
it
they
is
said that
about.
it's unconstitutional?
They
No,
haven't.
the Supreme Court, as the AG reminded them, Supreme Court has the power to say, to stay a law provided.
But
the
they've not
Supreme
done
Court
that.
feels
They've not
that-
stated because of it being unconstitutional. In fact, they've categorically said staying the implementation of laws and staying the law are different. Basically, the implementation of laws in this particular case will be stopped.
That's exactly
Right.
my question.
But the
I'm glad you
unconstitutional
mentioned it,
part,
because
Mr.
that's
Yadav,
exactly my
I haven't
question.
got that point of view.
Because
I don't think that
is
came up.
precisely what leads to mediation that my
Okay.
friend questioned.
Okay.
It is about mediation. If it was not about mediation, I would not object. But the committee appears to be about mediation. If it is not about mediation, then who am I to object to it? Supreme Court has its supreme powers to take advice from anyone in the world. But is this committee about mediation? If so, we may not be a party to that.
All right, that's an important point mentioned. I'm out of time on this. Sorry, Rajat, I couldn't come back to you. Completely out of time on this evening. But that's an important statement from the farmers. They don't want to be part of the mediation setup in quite this manner. We're going to quickly move on now to another one of our top stories. In fact, it's a huge national issue now. If COVID wasn't bad enough, the big concern now in many states, in fact 10 specifically, is the avian influenza, the bird flu. There's already a loss of business of 2.5 crores a day in one of the largest poultry markets of Asia, the Ghazipur Mandi here in Delhi. The Delhi government has ordered the market to shut down for 10 days amidst the bird flu spread. And it's there in several other states as well. There's culling of poultry taking place. We'll try and understand what the threat of the bird flu is for you and me.
हमें सभी राज्यों स्थानीय प्रशासन को वाटर बॉडीज के आसपास पक्षी बाजारों में, जू में, पोल्ट्री फार्म इत्यादि पर निरंतर निगरानी रखनी है ताकि पक्षियों के बीमार होने की जानकारी प्राथमिकता पर मिले।
Tests after these birds started dropping dead from the sky have confirmed bird flu in Delhi. Now, 10 states have cases of the avian disease. Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, UP, Kerala, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal, Haryana, Gujarat. Delhi is the latest.
अभी कुछ सैंपल्स और भेजे गए हैं जो जिनकी रिपोर्ट अभी आनी है. जालंधर में कुछ सैंपल भेजे गए हैं, उनकी रिपोर्ट आनी है. अभी सुबह एक और ये डिसीजन लिया गया है कि जो पैकेज्ड मीट आता है, चिकन आता है, पैक्ड चिकन, प्रोसेस्ड चिकन, इसको भी दिल्ली में बाहर से लाके नहीं बेचा जा सकेगा.
With one of the largest poultry markets of Asia, the Ghazipur Murga Mandi shut for 10 days for the first time in its history, business is hit. Losses are estimated to be about 2.5 crore rupees in a day.
गाजीपुर पोल्ट्री मार्केट में तकरीबन 250 से 300 टन माल रोज आता है और आप ये मान के चलें कि तकरीबन 2.5 करोड़ रुपए का कारोबार डेली होता है. ये तो लॉस है ही है बिजनेस का. और तकरीबन जितनी भी हमारी कैपिटल दुकानदारों पे लगी हुई थी, वो दुकानदार मार्केट से गए, वो कैपिटल भी डंप हो गई.
The shutting of the Ghazipur Mandi has sparked a blame game.
पत्र में जो एडवाइस किया गया, अगर उसको देखा गया होता तो आज गाजीपुर मंडी को बंद करने की जरूरत नहीं होती.
In Maharashtra, Muramba village in Parbani, about 500 kilometers from Mumbai, is the epicenter. About 800 poultry birds have died here in the past 3 days.
जिला प्रशासन ने वो गांव को इन्फेक्टेड जोन बोल के डिक्लेयर किया है. गांव का 1 किलोमीटर का परिसर जो है उसमें तकरीबन जितने भी पोल्ट्री बर्ड्स है, तकरीबन 9 से 10 हजार पोल्ट्री बर्ड्स है, वो पूरे डिस्ट्रॉय करने का ऑर्डर हमने दिया है. 10 किलोमीटर का एरिया जो है गांव के पास का, उनमें से पक्षियों का कोई आवागमन नहीं होगा.
States like Telangana and Bihar, despite not reporting confirmed cases of bird flu, face a slump in sale of poultry birds. DAHD, which is Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying, has revised its action plan for avian influenza after 2015. Culling of birds is underway at epicenters of all affected states. Along with that, DHD has also urged states to keep an adequate stock of PPE kits and other accessories required for culling operations. With camera person Shashikant Jha, Sukirti Dwivedi in New Delhi and Purva Chitnis in Mumbai, I am Arun Singh for NDTV.
So how dangerous is the bird flu? How does it potentially affect us? And what's happening in various cities? Joining us, Saurabh Bhardwaj, the MLA of the Aam Aadmi Party. Sameer Dalwai, the NCP spokesperson, joins us from Mumbai. Narendra Pasuparthi, the CEO and founder of Nandu's, Karnataka's leading omni-channel meat brand. We're also joined by Dr. KML Pathak, the former Deputy Director General of Animal Science in the Government of India. In fact, Dr. Pathak, let me come to you first. When does avian flu turn, or the avian influenza turn fatal for humans?
Look, Vishnu ji, this avian influenza, we are experiencing this infection in our country during winter season 2006. And every year there is an outbreak, and fortunately there has not been a single case of human infection in our country due to avian influenza or bird flu. Because the government of India has made an action plan in accordance, in consultation with the state governments to what are the preparedness.
No, but I'm asking you, sir, when can it turn fatal? That's my question.
Okay.
When? I'm trying to understand the science of this.
Okay. See, usually this virus, it belongs to it's an avian influenza virus. It doesn't belong to human. But yes, there have been cases of the human infection due to this H5N1, but it is very rare. And the persons who are in 1997, when it became fatal, at that time in Hong Kong, the persons who were involved in the live bird market, they got infected from these infected birds. But human to human infection is not there. So this way the infection goes from the infected birds to human, but it is very rare.
Okay. Saurabh, yesterday we had footage, in fact we played it out here on NDTV, of crows in the process of dying in parks in Delhi. you've now shut down Ghazipur Mandi. That's the largest, I believe, in Asia as well. How widespread do you believe this problem is in Delhi, and are you going to be shutting down more parks?
Vishnu, several places, like some of our MLAs also reported that there have been incidents where crows, especially crows, have been found dead in parks. So we have sent some samples today. Around 124 samples have been collected from various places to Jalandhar to find out the causes of death. If it comes out to be positive, then we'll know that what is the kind of spread across Delhi, and we are ready to take stringent measures to prevent this spread. As of now, as a precaution, the largest mandi of Asia, the Ghazipur Mandi, has been shut down for 10 days. And I think through program like yours, there is a lot of awareness. So I was talking to a few vendors also, the local vendors. Even the customers are not turning up to buy chicken. They are now more going for either goat meat or fish. So I think there is a lot of awareness, and we believe that we'll be able to contain this spread. And there are reports that such infection is spreading across 8 states. So I think it's quite an advanced stage.
Saurabh, as I understand it, all the tests which you had sent to Jalandhar or elsewhere have turned out to be positive in Delhi. Is that right?
Some reports which have come, they are all positive, like from reports from ducks in Sanjay Jheel, which were found dead. They were positive. So I believe because crows have died unusually. Otherwise, I haven't spotted a dead body of a crow throughout my life ever. So I think if people are able to spot, dead birds, most probably they are birds. They are because of this influenza. But because the government has to take some scientific decisions based on facts, so we have to send it and wait for the reports. And based on that, we will take some more decisions.
Mr. Dalwai, what is the Maharashtra government doing as far as culling birds is concerned? Do you believe more needs to be done?
Yes, so hi Vishnu. Basically in Maharashtra we have found infection at a few places, largely at Parbhani and also at some place in Amravati, Nagpur, Nasik and Latur. So the place in Parbhani is where a village called Murumba is around, where they have taken a decision to limit it to 1 kilometer and where there will be a culling will be done. In the other areas there won't be a culling done. But what the government of Maharashtra has done, in fact this evening at 5 o'clock, the Honorable Chief Minister had a meeting with the secretaries of various departments, as well as at 8 p.m. there was a video conference with all the commissioners and the collectors across the state as well. And everybody has been put on alert. There have been local intimation to the villagers and to the poultry farms to report any of this unusual findings that we are talking about. You've shown so well in your videos earlier this evening. And immediately they have to be informed. At the same time, any kind of getting in contact with the dead birds or disposing of the bodies or conducting any such postmortems is being controlled, and there have been strict instructions not to do it without the PPE or with appropriate kits and the appropriate disposal. As we know, eating of poultry, as long as it is cooked very well for to 70 degrees, does not pass it on to humans. But as my colleague, the other gentleman, the doctor was saying earlier, there have been cases of this being passed on to humans from birds rather, if they come in contact with the infected bird's feces or saliva or droppings or any other live fluids. So this is very important. But there has been no known case of transmission from human to human, fortunately. So that's one sigh of relief. But we must look to contain this, and it's both looking after containing the birds who are infected, as well as a very good public awareness campaign in the people that they should not come in contact with these infected birds without due care. And I thank NDTV for taking this up.
Narendra Pasuparthi, as the CEO and founder of Nandu's, which is Karnataka's leading omni-channel meat brand, are you seeing a massive drop in your sales of chicken?
Yeah, like the other panelists said, we've been familiar with this virus for the last 15 years, and we have a preparedness plan in place for over a decade now. And all of our farms are biosecure. Absolutely no instance of bird flu whatsoever in the last 15 years in any of our farms. So therefore, especially in these times, customers are relying on the brand. They want to deal with a trusted brand. They want to know the of they want transparency, traceability. So since we provide all of these factors when we bring the product to the market, and since we are 100% totally integrated, we haven't seen a significant dip in our space, in our business. I would say roughly between 7 and 10% is what we have seen. But we are continuously promoting safety measures. We are sending out videos and educational information to our consumers. And that seems to be playing well for us in the sense that they want to deal with a trusted brand. They want to know traceability. They want to know transparency in terms of the business. So, I mean, it's not a major effect for us in our business.
Dr. Pathak, one final question to you. What temperature does chicken need to be cooked for it to be safe? What about eggs? Is there a way in which you should be having eggs?
Yeah, so I will not advise people to stop eating the poultry product. They should eat it, but properly cooked chicken and properly boiled egg. The half-boiled or the runny boiled should not be consumed, and because this virus, this avian influenza or the bird flu virus type A, it is killed at 70-degree temperature and above. So if you consume the poultry product with properly cooked, then there is no risk of any transmission, because the virus it is killed at this temperature. And one thing another, Vishnuji, I want to mention through your channel, that there are so many rumors, there are so many panic people are creating unnecessarily, because it is affecting our poultry industry. You know that the poultry industry, it well organized, they observe the biosecurity measures, and the government plan, central government, in consultation with the state government, they have made a very good action plan that if the outbreak is there, how to kill the birds, how to dispose of these birds, what are the action has to be, what biosecurity measures are required for the poultry farmers, those workers who are involved in this industry, what action, what safety, personal safety they have to take. And another thing is that the awareness program, I congratulate NETV that you are continuously telecasting this program, covering this program. Now this bird flu, we have seen that it is now in 8 or 9 states. But right. The awareness program, the way you are doing, this is really, and the people should try to understand that there is no need of any panic.
Saurabh, would there be, just last word to you, any sort of public outreach to explain by the Aam Aadmi Party, the Delhi government, to people on how they should be consuming poultry at this stage?
I think government is just waiting for some results, and then we will run awareness campaign. Government is contemplating some awareness campaign, because there are a lot of people who still may not be watching news, and they can be tempted and they can get infected. So we will run such campaigns.
And Sameer, would you be doing the same in Maharashtra?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we are already working with the farmers and with the agriculture industry, and it's gone through them. The whole issue also is those who, Dr. Pathak has said it brilliantly. I completely agree with him. Also, those who handle livestock, we have to be very careful about those people, because they come in contact with these infected birds, may not know that the bird is infected at that time. And hence, we should also carry this message that those who are working, even farmers who are in connection, or who have poultry on their farms and who are using with them sometimes in their houses in the villages, they should be very careful. Any symptoms, and the symptoms are the same as any other flu. It could be fever, it could be running nose, it could be cold, cough, diarrhea, vomiting. These are the simple signs of any kind of flu has the same kind of symptoms. But if you are in touch with livestock like birds, you should be, and poultry, you should report this as soon as possible to the doctor close by. I think immediate starting of Tamiflu or Sildenafil has a very good response on these cases.
All right, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. It's certainly something we will continue to spread awareness on. People need to be careful as far as this bird flu is concerned, but there are temperatures in which if you cook your chickens and there are ways in which if you cook your egg, you would be safe. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. We're going to quickly move on now to what has in a sense been our dominant theme for a year, COVID. Today's a welcome day with just in a couple hours from now onwards, the vaccines are going to be rolled out physically from the Serum Institute of India on trucks. But what we'll be looking at with the MIT professor Arup Chakrabarty, who joins me, are on their new book on viruses, pandemics and immunity, and some of the key lessons which we've learned thus far in fighting perhaps some of the biggest threats to humanity. Welcome back. Let's quickly move on now to a very special book which we'll be looking at. We're joined by the MIT professor Arup Chakrabarti. His new book, Viruses, Pandemics and Immunity, is a look ahead at the lessons that we've learned from the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, why pandemics happen in the first place, and among other things, how an integrated system of technologies will help us respond more rapidly the next time something like this happens. Professor Chakrabarti, thanks very much for being with us. Now, I've gone through the book. It's absolutely fascinating. And, you've raised a couple of points and a couple of things which I just wanted to learn a little bit more about. Firstly, you say that coronaviruses are a family of RNA viruses, and for years 4 different types of these viruses have circulated in the human population, and most of these we believe are essentially harmless, the common cold for example. But is there a real threat that going forward the presence of new RNA viruses such as what we are encountering now with COVID represent a far, far greater threat, not just COVID, but even the emergence of something else?
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me on your show. Yes, indeed. RNA viruses are a class of viruses that use a very different mechanism for replicating themselves than we do. Most organisms go from, they encode information about their genome as DNA, and then that DNA is replicated to propagate the species. And we make proteins, which are the parts that make us all function by going from DNA to RNA to proteins. RNA viruses do this differently. They carry their genome as RNA. And so they have to replicate this RNA, and they do that with a certain machinery that they bring with themselves when they enter our cells. And this machinery is not as high fidelity as the machinery that replicates DNA. So they make a lot of mutations, that is, changes or mistakes. And what happens is that as these mistakes arise, there is always a chance that a new type of RNA virus will evolve that is very dangerous for us.
Okay.
Another very important feature that has to be remembered is that many viruses that infect us ever since we became agrarian are also shared with other animals. And so because this RNA genome is much more malleable, what can happen sometimes is that you can swap pieces of the RNA of the animal version of the virus with our human version of the virus. So typically, of course, these viruses are worthless. They don't infect humans. But once in a while, a variant can emerge that has, for example, in this case of coronavirus, a spike that is very different from what has been in the common cold viruses. And therefore, now no one in the human population has immunity to it, and you get this sort of very fast pandemic to spread. And coronavirus are not alone. In fact, if I would have to have predicted which will be the next pandemic, it would be influenza, which is also an RNA virus.
In fact, Professor Chakrabarti, that brings me to my next question. Why do new viruses cause pandemics or epidemics? You've asked this in your book.
Yeah, so when you have a virus that has been circulating in our population for a while, then many of us have mounted immune responses to this, the way that we fight viruses. And so when we have immunity to this virus, that is, we have antibodies and other immune system cells, that if you see the next virus again, the same virus again, we swat it away. But now, when a totally new virus emerges, nobody in the population has any form of immunity to it. So therefore, everyone can potentially get infected, and can then, if the virus at the same time is easily transmittable, such as many respiratory viruses, then it starts to spread very rapidly through the population. So it is because no one has immunity to it. If you wait long enough, a great fraction of us will get immunity to it. Along the way, a lot of us will die, but the virus will go away. This is how it used to happen in past times when we did not have the science of vaccination.
Has COVID-19 actually reminded us of what is a truth which we often forget, that infectious disease-causing viruses are perhaps the greatest existential threat to humanity, not wars?
I think this is absolutely true. The human history is inextricably linked to our war with infectious disease-causing microscopic organisms. And we have had many, many battles with many, many diseases. And because of better sanitation, antibiotics, and vaccination, we have been winning these wars, even though our lifestyle has become such that it encourages the evolution of these viruses. So it is the greatest existential threat in the world, and what we really need to do now is, after this battle with COVID is won, we are in a place of development and evolution of technology where we should ask ourselves, as an international community, should we try now to win the war? That is, to develop approaches to create a more pandemic resilient world, not just fight one battle at a time.
Yeah. Professor Chakravarty, wonderful speaking to you, and I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to read a little bit about what you spoke about just now on the fight ahead. And you've written, modern computational power, advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence and mechanistic understanding of immunology and epidemiology can be brought together to analyze data that's now available and thus learn how viruses spread. Perhaps this is the key towards fighting all of this in the future. I'd like to thank you very much, sir, for being with us on this program. I'm out of time. It's time for us to take this short break.